Project Chimera, The Serpent Ridge Anomaly, Part 1, The Unyielding Earth, Chapter 1, The Broken Tooth. The silence in the Uintah Basin is a physical presence. It's a pressure on the eardrums, a weight on the soul. It's a silence born of vast empty spaces of wind-scoured sandstone and horizons that refuse to be tamed by the trivialities of man. For 2 months, that silence had been our enemy, mocking us with every snapped drill rod and fried circuit board. I am Dr. Eris Thorne, and I came to this forsaken patch of Utah dirt chasing a ghost. Not the spectral kind, but a ghost from my childhood, a memory of silent, impossible lights dancing in the night sky over my suburban home. That memory had shaped my life, steering me through a PhD in astrophysics, and a career spent staring at the heavens, always searching for an echo of that sublime mystery. Now the search had brought me here to a place the world knew as Serpent Ridge Ranch, the epicenter of the impossible. Our current obsession was a ghost of a different sort, buried deep within the colossal sandstone mesa that dominated the ranch's western flank. Ground-penetrating radar, our digital divining rod, had painted a picture of something that had no business being there. A perfect dome-shaped anomaly, hundreds of feet across, entombed in rock that hadn't seen the light of day in millennia. It was surrounded by smaller, equally baffling signatures, a metallic graveyard or a forgotten outpost, depending on who you asked. My working theory, the one I kept mostly to myself, was that we were looking at a craft, ancient dormant, and decidedly not of human origin. Dr. Evelyn Reed, our lead physicist and the brilliant skeptical anchor of our team, argued for a more terrestrial explanation. It's a lopalith, Eris, she'd said 100 times her voice, a calm counterpoint to my excitement. A rare igneous intrusion. The density readings are consistent with a high concentration of ferrous metals. And the perfect geometry, the secondary anomalies, I'd retort. Nature abhors a vacuum, but it occasionally flirts with Euclidean geometry, she'd reply with a wry smile before turning back to her screens, her world of clean data and verifiable hypotheses. The only way to settle the debate was to get a sensor inside. To do that, we had to drill, and the mesa, it seemed, was fighting back. We broke another rod. The voice of Grizzly Adams, our drilling foreman, crackled over the radio, laced with a familiar, weary frustration. He was a man carved from the very rock he was trying to pierce his face, a roadmap of sun and hardship. He didn't believe in aliens or wormholes, but he believed in his equipment, and its consistent, inexplicable failure was wearing him down. I stood with Ken Kestrel Riley, our head of security on the overlook near Homestead, too, the setting sun painting the mesa in hues of blood and fire. Kestrel, an ex-Special Forces operator, was the embodiment of pragmatic calm. His world was one of threat assessment and risk mitigation, but Serpent Ridge was a threat he couldn't quantify. Again, Kestrel said into his radio, his voice flat. "That's the third one this month." "Like something just sheared it clean off," Grizzly replied. 400 feet in, whatever's in there, it's like it's trying to take our drill string apart, piece by piece. Kestrel lowered the radio and looked at me, his eyes dark under the brim of his cap. "This isn't normal wear and tear, Eris. You know that, right?" "Nothing about this place is normal," I murmured, watching the distant lights of the drilling rig flicker against the encroaching darkness. "It's as if the phenomenon has an immune system, and we're the virus it's trying to expel." "Well, its T-cells are costing us a fortune," Kestrel grunted. He was the guardian of our billionaire benefactor's investment, and every broken piece of equipment was a debit against the search for truth. Marcus Vance, the enigmatic owner of Serpent Ridge, had given us a simple, impossible mandate: find answers. He didn't care about the cost, but Kestrel did. A mission without discipline was just an expensive hobby. We drove the ATV down the dusty track towards the drill site, the air growing thick with the smell of diesel and hot metal. The massive rig was silent, a wounded giant against the star-dusted sky. Grizzly and his crew were gathered around the borehole, their faces illuminated by work lights, grim and exhausted. The problem was immense. 100 feet of hardened steel drill rod weighing thousands of pounds was stuck 400 feet up a vertical shaft inside a mountain. It was a needle in a haystack made of solid rock. "How are we getting it out?" I asked, though I already knew the answer was bleak. Grizzly spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. "Prayer, maybe. We're going to try a fishing tool. It's a cone with internal threads. We lower it down, hope we hit the end of the pipe just right, get it to bite, and then pull. It's like threading a needle in the dark from a quarter-mile away." For the next 5 hours, I watched them work. It was a brutal, delicate ballet of man and machine. The rhythmic clang of steel, the grunts of exertion, the tense whispered commands. They were warriors battling a mountain, and the mountain was winning. Evelyn arrived, her tablet glowing in the dark. She wasn't looking at the rig, but at the data streaming from the array of sensors we had placed around the site. Magnetometers, spectrum analyzers, radiation detectors, anything I asked her. A low-level spike in the 1.6 gigahertz frequency about 10 minutes before the rod broke, she said her brow furrowed in concentration, and a corresponding magnetic field fluctuation. Very localized right around the borehole. A directed energy pulse, or a geologic event, she countered ever the skeptic. A piezoelectric discharge from quartz compression. We're putting immense pressure on the rock. Enough to snap a steel rod. She didn't answer, her eyes fixed on the data. The silence stretched, filled only by the chirping of crickets and the groaning of the fishing line. It was past midnight when a shout went up from the rig. We got her. I think we got her. A wave of relief washed over the crew. The winch groaned, the cable grew taut, and slowly, agonizingly, the broken section of the drill string began to rise from the depths. It emerged into the light like a strange metallic fossil, the breakpoint, a mangled whirl of sheared steel. Grizzly ran a gloved hand over the break. Never seen anything like it. Not a stress fracture, not a torsion break. It's like something grabbed it and twisted its head off. We had won the battle, but the war was far from over. As the crew worked to clear the borehole, I walked to the edge of the clearing and stared up at the mesa. It stood silhouetted against the Milky Way, a silent, brooding monolith. It held a secret, and it was guarding it with a strange, almost malevolent intelligence. We had just retrieved a broken tooth from the mouth of the beast, and tomorrow we were going to stick our heads right back inside. Chapter 2, The Ghost in the Machine. The victory at the drill site was a fleeting reprieve. It had taken 2 days to clear the borehole and resume drilling 2 days, during which an uneasy quiet settled over the ranch. It was the calm before the storm, the held breath before the plunge. We all felt it. The phenomenon was watching, waiting. I spent those 2 days in the command center, a converted homestead packed to the rafters, with humming racks of servers and glowing monitors poring over data with Evelyn. We argued, as we always did. I saw intelligent patterns. She saw chaotic but natural interference. Look at the periodicity of the 1.6 gigahertz signal EV, I said, pointing to a graph on the main screen. It's not random noise, it pulses. It corresponds with every major equipment failure we've had at the mesa. Correlation isn't causation, Eris, she replied, sipping her third coffee of the morning. It could be a byproduct. The stress on the rock strata could be generating the radio frequencies, which in turn interfere with the electronics. It's a feedback loop. A feedback loop that selectively targets the drill's control systems and snaps hardened steel. That's one hell of a natural phenomenon. Our debate was interrupted by the arrival of Leo Vance, our geomatics and drone expert. Leo was a prodigy barely in his mid-20s with a mind that moved at the speed of light and an infectious, almost boyish enthusiasm for the unknown. To him, Serpent Ridge wasn't a threat, it was the ultimate playground. The new gear's here, he announced, grinning from ear to ear. Mobile LiDAR unit, helicopter mount, handheld slam scanner. It's Christmas in September. This was the next phase of our assault. If we couldn't easily pierce the mesa's skin, we would map it and everything above and around it in unprecedented detail. LiDAR, or light detection and ranging, was our way of painting the invisible. By bouncing billions of laser points off the environment, we could create a perfect 3D model of the ranch. But we weren't just looking for hills and trees. We were hunting for atmospheric distortions, for pockets of energy, for the very structure of the anomalies themselves. We're going to paint the ghost, Leo said, his eyes sparkling. The plan was ambitious, bordering on insane. Kestrel dubbed it the Grand Experiment. As soon as night fell, we would unleash every sensor at our disposal in a coordinated ranch-wide ballet of technology. Leo and a specialist named John Brown would drive the mobile LiDAR truck back and forth across the property. Cameron Fugel, our seasoned helicopter pilot, would shadow them from above, his chopper fitted with a sophisticated sensor pod and night vision cameras. Leo would also deploy a LiDAR-equipped drone to fly the in and out path, the strange trajectory a UAP had taken in 2022, seemingly flying directly through the solid rock of the mesa. Meanwhile, at the Triangle, a patch of ground in the east field that was arguably the ranch's hottest spot for paranormal activity, I would oversee the burner experiment. We had detected a strange blob-like anomaly there a year prior, hovering at an altitude of exactly 31 feet. It had destroyed a rocket mid-flight. My hypothesis was that it was a pocket of plasma or a localized distortion in space-time. To test it, we were bringing in the burner from a hot air balloon to blast a pillar of flame into that 31-foot region, hoping to make the anomaly visible to our thermal and LiDAR scans. And all the while, Grizzly's team would keep drilling at the mesa. The entire operation was designed to provoke a response to piss off the phenomenon, as Kestrel so elegantly put it. As dusk settled, a palpable tension filled the air. The command center was a hive of activity. Voices crackled over the radio network, each station reporting its readiness. LiDAR truck is Go Came John's voice. Chopper is airborne holding at 1,000 feet, Cameron reported from the sky. Drill site is operational. We're making good progress. Grizzly's voice added a welcome note of optimism. I was at the Triangle with Kestrel and a hot air balloon pilot named Steve. The burner rig looked like some steampunk contraption, a brass nozzle aimed at the sky, connected by thick hoses to a bank of propane tanks. Dragon, you're clear to launch the first rocket from the east field, I said into my radio. We used the moniker Dragon for Kestrel's operational command, a name the team had given him out of respect for his fierce, protective nature. Copy that, Eris. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We saw the fiery trail of the rocket ascend into the purple twilight. It was the starting gun. LiDAR run is a Go-Eye broadcast. They're moving. On the main screen in the command center, we could see the GPS trackers of the truck and helicopter begin their slow crawl across the ranch map. For 15 minutes, the experiment proceeded without a hitch. The LiDAR truck passed the triangle approaching the mesa. Leo's drone buzzed through the in-and-out path, its own lasers painting the canyon walls. Then the first strange report came in. It was from Thomas, one of Kestrel's security team stationed near the drill site. Command, this is Thomas. I'm looking at the chopper. He thinks he's directly over the LiDAR truck, but he's not. He's way behind. He's almost directly over us at the drill site. I checked the GPS data. Thomas was right. The two icons on the map, which should have been perfectly aligned, were separated by nearly half a mile. Cameron, confirm your position relative to the truck, I asked. I'm directly over him. Cameron's voice came back confident. I've got a visual on his headlights. He's right beneath me. Negative, Cameron, I said, a knot tightening in my stomach. Your GPS shows you are significantly east of the truck. You are over the drill site. There was a pause. Are you serious? That's impossible. I'm looking right at it. This was a classic Serpent Ridge phenomenon, a complete and utter disconnect between human perception and technological measurement. Was Cameron hallucinating? Or was something projecting a false image into the sky? A hologram, an optical illusion on a massive scale. Cameron, trust the instruments, not your eyes. I instructed, my voice tight. Adjust your position eastward. Leo, are you getting any anomalous LiDAR returns from the chopper's position? Working on it. Leo's voice crackled, filled with excitement. The real-time preview is weird. It's like the space between the truck and the chopper is stretched. I don't know how to describe it. So, it took Cameron a full minute of flying blind, ignoring what his senses were telling him to get his GPS marker to align with the trucks. The moment they aligned, his perplexed voice came over the radio. Okay, now I'm over him. But what the hell was I looking at before? Before anyone could answer, a new voice, cut in sharp and urgent. It was Leo from the command center. Eris, you need to see this. Jim's drone LiDAR right over the spire. Holy crap. On my tablet, I pulled up the drone's LiDAR feed. It was a point cloud image, a swirling mass of green dots representing the canyon. But right in the middle of it, where there should have been empty air, was a stark vertical column, a pillar of nothingness that the LiDAR was detecting as a solid object. It was the Spire anomaly, a 300-foot tall column of distorted space we had detected once before, and Jim's drone had just hit it. At the same instant, the drone's GPS signal vanished from our map. We lost the drone, Kestrel said, his voice grim. No, Leo's voice corrected him, a tremor of awe in his tone. We didn't lose it, it's just not there anymore. The ghost in the machine was starting to show itself, and it was bigger and stranger than we could have ever imagined. Chapter 3, the Cone of Silence. The loss of the drone sent a ripple of alarm through the team, but we had to press on. The grand experiment was a tightly choreographed performance, and there was no room for improvisation. Keep the mobile scan going. I ordered my mind racing. Leo processed that Spire data immediately. I want to know its exact dimensions and location. My attention shifted back to the triangle. The LiDAR truck and helicopter were now on their return run heading east. It was time for the burner. Steve, get ready, I said, my heart pounding. We're going to heat up that 31-foot zone. Evelyn's voice came over the radio from the command center. Eris, a word of caution. You are about to inject a significant amount of thermal energy into a location known for unpredictable energy fluctuations. The effects are non-deterministic. That's the point, Ev, I replied. We're fishing. Let's see what bites. I gave the signal. Steve Jones, a man who had spent more time in the air than on the ground, opened the valve on the propane burner. A deafening roar shattered the basin's silence as a pillar of incandescent flame shot 30 feet into the night sky. The heat was immense, a physical blow even from 100 feet away. Burner is hot, I reported. All cameras recording. Caleb, you getting this on the handheld slam? Caleb, one of our techs, was circling the flame with a handheld LiDAR scanner, his face a mask of concentration. I'm painting it, Eris. Data is flowing. We ran the burner in 5-second bursts. The flame was a brilliant orange against the profound black of the sky. On the thermal camera feed displayed on my tablet, it was a searing white column. During the third burn, it happened. Whoa, what was that? Kestrel exclaimed, pointing to the thermal monitor. I saw it too. A dark, vaporous shape like a massive smoke ring seemed to peel away from the top of the flame, but it wasn't rising with the heat. It was moving horizontally westward directly towards the mesa. It moved with an unnatural smoothness, a fluidic grace that defied the chaotic thermals of the flame. Did you see that I asked the team at large? We saw it, Evelyn confirmed, her voice. Stripped of its usual skepticism, it looked like a shadow. But a shadow on a thermal camera, that doesn't make sense. It would have to be an object of extreme cold. And it looked like it followed the edge of a bowl, Caleb added, lowering his scanner, like it hit an invisible barrier and curved around it. An invisible bowl in the sky. The words sent a shiver down my spine. We were all thinking the same thing. 2 years ago, a different LiDAR scan run by Leo's predecessor had detected a massive cone-shaped anomaly centered directly over the triangle, its apex nearly 2,000 feet high. We had dubbed it the Cone of Silence because radio communications inside its invisible walls were severely degraded. We had tried to replicate the finding for months without success, until perhaps now. Leo, I said into the radio, check the terrestrial laser scanner data. The one Pete Kelsey is running near the triangle. Is he seeing anything? A few moments of static-filled silence, then Leo's voice breathless. Confirmed. Eris, it's back. The cone is back. The TLS is painting a clear structure all around the triangle. It's huge. We had done it. The combination of the mobile scan, the drone, the rockets, and the thermal energy from the burner had stimulated the phenomenon. The giant had awoken. At that exact moment, Cameron, the helicopter pilot, came on the radio. He was now climbing to a higher altitude, 5,000 feet, to get a wider scanning angle for the LiDAR. His voice was suddenly broken, shot through with static. Get ference on the dio-attic on this Quincy. Cameron, you're breaking up, Kestrel said. Say again. Just .attic.cant clear. His communication system was failing, but he was at 5,000 feet, well above any ground-based interference. He was also directly above the triangle, flying into the upper reaches of the newly detected cone. We had previously recorded bizarre energy spikes at that exact altitude. Then a new, more alarming report from Cameron, his voice cutting through the static tight with adrenaline. I saw something. Off the port side. Fast. Describe it, Cameron, I urged. Small. Luminous. No wings. No strobes. Just a light. Moving fast. There's another one. My God, they're all over the place up here. On the ground, we saw nothing. The sky above was a placid sea of stars. But Cameron, wearing military-grade night vision goggles, was in a different world. He was flying through a swarm of UAPs. How close are they to the helicopter? Kestrel asked, his voice deadly serious. Too close, Cameron replied. Very close. They're zipping by, like fireflies. I can't track them. The implications were staggering. Were these objects always there, invisible to the naked eye, revealed only by night vision technology? Were they connected to the Cone of Silence? Were they probes, drones, or something else entirely? The hair on my arm stood up. We were inside the cage with the animal, and we had just rattled the bars. My thoughts were shattered by a frantic call from the mesa. It was Grizzly. Eris, Kestrel. You're not going to believe this. What is it, Grizzly? The ground's moving. We're feeling a vibration up here, I think. I think we're about to break through. A collective gasp went through the command network. After months of failures at the very height of the most ambitious experiment we had ever conducted, the drill was about to pierce the final layer of rock and enter the anomalous dome buried within the mesa. It was too much. A swarm of UAPs in the sky, a massive energy cone manifesting around us, and a potential breakthrough into an unknown object buried in the earth. It was a perfect storm of high strangeness. I'm on my way, I said, already running for the ATV. Everyone hold your positions. Eric, get to the helipad. Cameron is coming to pick you up and take you to the top of the mesa. I want every possible sensor on that borehole when it breaks through. As I sped towards the mesa, the wind whipping past my face, I looked up. The sky was serene, betraying none of the chaos Cameron was witnessing. But I knew We were no longer just observing. We were participants in a drama that had been playing out on this land for centuries, and the curtain was about to rise. Chapter 4, The Breach. The ride to the mesa was a blur of adrenaline and anticipation. The world narrowed to the bouncing beam of my ATV's headlight on the dusty trail. Above, I could hear the thumping blades of Cameron's helicopter as he descended to pick up Evelyn and race her to the summit. I arrived at the drill site to find a scene of controlled chaos. The massive diesel generator powering the rig was roaring, and the entire platform was vibrating with a low, resonant hum that seemed to come from the rock itself. Grizzly and his crew, their faces slick with sweat, in the harsh glare of the work lights, were moving with a focused intensity. "What's the status?" I yelled over the din. Grizzly pointed to the drill head controls. "Pressure just dropped to 0. We're through the capstone. Whatever is below it, it's hollow, or at least not solid rock." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. A hollow space inside the dome. "Keep pushing," I said in my voice, barely a whisper. Slowly, the operator advanced the drill string. On a nearby monitor, a camera aimed at the target breakthrough point on the surface of the mesa showed nothing but dark, rocky ground. We were watching, waiting for the tip of the 6-inch drill bit to emerge from the earth like a metallic serpent. Then a plume of dust erupted from the ground, followed by the glint of steel. "We have broken through," the operator shouted, a triumphant grin splitting his face. "Woo, all right," I yelled, clapping him on the back. A cheer went up from the exhausted crew. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated victory. Months of frustration of broken parts and broken spirits erased in an instant. At that exact moment, every light at the drill site flickered and died. The roar of the generator sputtered into silence. We were plunged into absolute darkness and a sudden, profound silence. "What happened?" someone shouted. Backup power Kestrel's voice, now on site, cut through the confusion. Emergency battery-powered lights flickered on, casting long, dancing shadows across the scene. But the rig was dead. Every piece of electronic equipment was offline. EMP, I wondered aloud. Or a power surge from whatever we just drilled into, said a voice beside me. It was Evelyn. She must have just landed. Her face was pale in the emergency lighting, but her eyes were wide with scientific curiosity. She held a handheld magnetometer, and its needle was spinning wildly. "The magnetic field here is off the charts," she said, "and it's oscillating. We had breached the anomaly, and it had greeted us with a blast of energy that had crippled our operation. It was a warning shot." As the crew worked to reboot the generator, my radio, one of the few hardened devices still working, crackled to life. It was Leo, his voice, a torrent of excitement. "Eris Evelyn. The post-processing on the SLAM scanner data from the triangle, it's impossible. You have to see this." He sent the file to my tablet, which had blessedly survived the energy pulse. I opened it, and Evelyn and I huddled around the small screen. The image was a 3D point cloud of the triangle area. But something was profoundly wrong. The LiDAR had not only mapped the surface, but it had also detected points underneath the ground. A perfect ring-shaped cluster of data points, as if it had seen through solid earth. "LiDAR can't see through the ground," Evelyn stated, her voice flat with disbelief. "It's physically impossible. The infrared light should be absorbed or reflected by the first few millimeters of soil." Unless the ground isn't the only thing there," I mused. "What if it's scanning a geometric distortion in space-time itself?" "Don't be ridiculous," she started to say, but Leo's voice cut her off. "There's more," he said. "Look up." I manipulated the 3D image, tilting the perspective upward. Floating in the sky, directly above the underground ring, was another identical ring of anomalous data points. One ring buried in the earth, its mirror image suspended in the heavens. My blood ran cold. I had seen this structure before in the esoteric pages of theoretical physics journals. Two rings forming the mouths or ergospheres of a traversable wormhole, an Einstein-Rosen bridge, a gateway. "My God," Evelyn whispered, her skepticism finally completely shattered. "Look at the correlation. It's a perfect one-to-one match. It has structure." Was this the secret of Serpent Ridge? Not a buried spaceship, but something infinitely more profound. A stable, physical portal to somewhere else. Was this the sky door from the ancient Ute legends of this area? The pieces began to fall into place with terrifying speed, the UAP flying through the mesa. The GPS voids where drones simply ceased to exist for a few moments. The lost time we had measured above the triangle the year before, it all pointed to a phenomenon that wasn't just visiting this place, it was this place. A place where the fabric of our reality was thin, where 2 points in space-time were connected. and we had just drilled a 600-foot borehole right into the side of its power source. The generators roared back to life, and the work lights flooded the mesa top with a reassuring artificial glare. The immediate crisis was over, but a deeper, more existential one was just beginning. We gathered the core team at the command center in the early hours of the morning, the sky beginning to pale in the east. We were exhausted, running on caffeine and adrenaline, but no one could even think of sleeping. Leo presented his findings on the main screen, his voice trembling slightly as he explained the implications of the dual ring anomaly. Pete Kelsey, the terrestrial laser scanning expert video, called in to confirm he had seen the same thing. The cone of silence was real. The underground and aerial rings were real. Then came the footage from Cameron's helicopter. The video from the downward-facing camera showed a strange pulsing light in Dry Gulch Creek, a place known for animal mutilations and other bizarre events. The footage from his night vision goggles was even more disturbing. Clear, undeniable video of small, self-illuminated orbs maneuvering around the helicopter with impossible speed and agility. We had more data than we'd ever collected in a single night. More data, in fact, than had been collected in the entire 5-year history of the project. Every experiment had yielded something anomalous. Every sensor had screamed. We had poked the beehive, and the bees were swarming. As the meeting wound down, we all migrated outside, drawn by the new day. We stood on the porch of the command center, watching the sun rise over the eastern ridge. The light caught the top of the distant mesa, illuminating the tiny, solitary form of the silent drill rig. Our victory felt different now. We had breached the mesa, but in doing so, we might have breached something far more fundamental. We now had a 600-foot shaft leading directly to the heart of an anomaly that appeared to bend space and time. The first snowflake of the season drifted down, melting on my cheek. Winter was coming. Our operational window was closing. We would be forced to abandon the ranch for months, leaving the borehole capped but open a wound in the side of the mountain. We would have the winter to analyze our mountain of data, to try and comprehend what we were dealing with. But one thought echoed in the silence of my mind, a thought that was both exhilarating and terrifying. We had opened a door, and we had no idea what was on the other side. Part 2, The Winter of Knowing, Chapter 5, Echoes in the Data. The snows came early that year, blanketing Serpent Ridge in a thick shroud of white. The silence returned deeper and more profound than before. Our frantic activity was replaced by the quiet hum of automated sensors and the lonely vigil of Kestrel's skeleton security crew. The ranch was put to bed, but for the rest of us, the work had just begun. We retreated to our respective labs and offices, connected by encrypted video links and a shared obsessive purpose. We were no longer just a team. We were initiates in a strange new religion, and the data from the grand experiment was our sacred text. We had months to decipher its secrets before the spring thaw would allow us to return. My days were a blur of numbers and code running simulations of the UAP flight paths, cross-referencing their appearances with the 1.6 gigahertz bursts and the magnetic field fluctuations. The patterns were undeniable. The phenomena were linked. The UAPs, the energy cone, the signals, the underground dome, they were all components of a single vast interconnected system. It was an ecosystem of the impossible. Evelyn, working from her university lab, abandoned her search for geological explanations. The data was too clean, too structured. She attacked it with the ferocity of a convert applying quantum field theory and advanced string theory models to the LIDAR scans. It's not a wormhole in the classic sci-fi sense. Eris, she explained during one of our late-night calls, her face illuminated by the glow of her monitors. It's not a tunnel from point A to point B. It's more like an area of dimensional superposition, a place where multiple realities are bleeding into each other. The rings we see in the LIDAR aren't the edges of a portal. They're the interference patterns, like ripples on a pond where two different worlds touch. Her theory was mind-bending, but it fit the evidence. It would explain the perceptual distortions, the way Cameron could see the LIDAR truck in one place while his instruments placed it somewhere else. His brain was momentarily perceiving a different layer of reality than his GPS was. It would explain how a UAP could fly through solid rock. It wasn't flying through our dimension's mesa, but passing through a space where another dimension's empty sky occupied the same coordinates. Leo, meanwhile, was our digital archaeologist digging through the terabytes of raw data. He discovered things we had missed in the heat of the moment. In the audio files from the night of the experiment, he isolated a low-frequency hum that had started the exact second the drill breached the dome. It was below the range of human hearing, a deep, resonant infrasound. When he sped up the recording, a complex repeating pattern emerged. It wasn't random noise, it was a signal. It's like a heartbeat, Leo told us, his voice filled with awe. The thing in the mesa has a heartbeat, and we woke it up. The most disturbing discovery, however, came from Kestrel. He had been reviewing the footage from the high-resolution surveillance cameras that dotted the ranch. One camera positioned on a ridge overlooking the mesa had been recording in infrared throughout the grand experiment. He shared the footage with us without commentary. It was a time-lapse of the entire night. We saw the helicopter a bright white spot against the cold ground. We saw the heat signature of the LiDAR truck moving back and forth. We saw the brilliant flash of the burner at the triangle. And then we saw something else. Starting at the moment the drill broke through, a faint thermal bloom appeared on the surface of the mesa, centered on the new borehole. It grew slowly, steadily over the next few hours, a subtle warming of the rock itself. By dawn, an area 50 feet in diameter around the borehole was several degrees warmer than the surrounding terrain. The thing we had drilled into was emitting heat. It was active. "It's waking up," I murmured, the same words Leo had used. "There's more," Kestrel said, his voice grim. "Watch the perimeter." He zoomed in on the fence line at the southern edge of the property. The timestamp in the corner of the screen read 3:00 a.m. A pair of headlights appeared on the public road that ran adjacent to the ranch. An old pickup truck. It slowed, then pulled over. Two figures got out. They were too far away to make out details, but they were carrying equipment. They set up a tripod pointing something towards the mesa. "Who are they?" Evelyn asked. "Don't know," Kestrel replied. "They were there for about an hour, then packed up and left. They weren't on public land, so we couldn't challenge them, but they were watching, and they knew exactly when and where to look." The implication was chilling. We weren't the only ones interested in Serpent Ridge. Someone else was out there, someone with their own agenda, and they were monitoring our activities with a keen and knowledgeable eye. Were they a government agency, a private corporation, a clandestine group of researchers? Our search for answers had suddenly become a race. The winter months dragged on a slow, methodical accumulation of evidence. Each new discovery added a layer of complexity to the mystery. We were like blind men describing an elephant, each of us touching a different part of the beast, a leg, a tusk, a tail, and struggling to comprehend the whole. But the picture that was emerging was one of staggering, terrifying scale. We were not dealing with ghosts or simple extraterrestrial visitors. We were dealing with a piece of physics so advanced it bordered on magic. A technology or a natural phenomenon that could manipulate space-time and perhaps even reality itself. And it was located not in some distant star system, but buried under a desolate patch of Utah dirt. As the snows began to melt and the first signs of spring appeared in the basin, our team prepared to return. But the mood was different this time. The initial excitement had been tempered by a heavy sense of responsibility. We were no longer just explorers, we were guardians. We had woken something up. And now we had to figure out what it wanted before someone else did. Part 3, The Quickening, Chapter 6, The Return Spring. In the Uinta Basin arrived, not as a gentle thaw, but as a sudden violent release. The snowpack melted in a rush, turning the dry creek beds into muddy torrents. The air, once sharp and sterile with cold, became thick with the smell of damp earth and sagebrush. It smelled of life, of awakening. Our return to Serpent Ridge felt like a homecoming and an infiltration all at once. The familiar landscape seemed subtly altered, charged with a new and potent energy. It was as if the land itself was holding its breath, aware of our presence, aware of the wound we had left in the side of its most prominent feature. Kestrel's first briefing set the tone. Perimeter sensors logged 478 anomalous events over the winter. He set his face grim as he addressed us in the newly expanded command center. Motion detectors tripped with nothing on camera, magnetic field disturbances that don't correlate to solar activity, and a dozen instances of drone incursions from outside our airspace, unmarked military-grade quadcopters. They come in fast and low-hug the terrain and are gone before we can get a lock. The Watchers. They hadn't been idle. Our first priority was the mesa. We flew up in the chopper, the ground still too soft for the ATVs. From the air, the drill site looked like a small surgical scar on the vast body of the mountain. Grizzly and his team were already there, having been flown in at dawn. They were preparing to execute the next crucial phase of the operation, reaming the 6-inch borehole to a full 18 inches in diameter. A wider shaft would allow us to lower more sophisticated sensor packages, our eyes and ears, into the heart of the anomaly. Evelyn, clad in a heavy parka against the sharp wind, was already at work, her instruments spread across a folding table. "The thermal bloom is gone," she reported as I approached. "The surface temperature is ambient, but the infrasound is still there. Faint but steady. A resting heartbeat of 0.73 hertz. She pointed to her magnetometer. "And this is new. There's a persistent, low-level magnetic field flux. It's not static, it's breathing, expanding and contracting in perfect sync with the infrasound pulse. The creature was sleeping, but his dreams were magnetic. Let's wake it up, I said. The reaming process was a nerve-wracking affair. Every time the diamond-tipped cutting head bit into the sandstone, the infrasound signal would spike and the 1.6 gigahertz frequency would burst to life on our spectrum analyzers like a shout of protest. The drill's electronic controls, now heavily shielded, would flicker. Twice the entire system shut down just as it had on the night of the breach. But this time we were prepared. The crew would reboot, and the slow, arduous process of widening the tunnel would continue. It took 3 days. 3 days of grinding steel, shrieking energy signals, and the palpable feeling that we were performing surgery on a conscious and unwilling patient. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, Grizzly gave the thumbs up. The shaft was clear. Now the real work could begin. We had spent the winter designing and building Orpheus, a custom sensor probe named for the Greek hero who journeyed into the underworld. It was a 3-foot-long titanium cylinder packed with every sensor we could miniaturize, high-definition cameras, a LiDAR mapping system, a gamma-ray detector, magnetometers, an atmospheric composition sensor, a broad-spectrum RF analyzer. It was hardened against radiation and extreme pressure, a deep space probe designed for a journey of only 675 feet. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the mesa, the team gathered around the borehole. The winch was in place, the armored fiber optic cable spooled and ready. Orpheus hung from its tether, gleaming under the work, like a silver needle poised to enter the vein of the unknown. Descent begins in 5, I announced over the comms network, my voice tight. All stations report. From the command center, Leo's voice was a calm counterpoint to the wind. Command is go. All sensors are green. We are recording. Evelyn stood beside me, her eyes fixed on her monitors. Science is go. Let's see what's down there. Kestrel Ever, the pragmatist, gave a simple security is go. Watch your backs. The winch motor hummed to life. Slowly, carefully, Orpheus was lowered into the darkness. Chapter 7, The Eye of the Needle. The journey of Orpheus was a descent into the planet's primordial past. On the main screen in the command center, the probe's forward-facing camera showed us a world no human had ever seen, a smooth, perfectly cylindrical tunnel through layers of sandstone, each stratum a different shade of ochre rust, and tan, a geological timeline stretching back millions of years. Passing 200 feet, the winch operator called out, all systems nominal. The infrasound is amplifying, Evelyn noted, her gaze flicking between her instruments. The magnetic field is becoming more organized, less chaotic. At 400 feet, the depth where the original drill string had snapped the RF analyzer on Orpheus suddenly lit up. The 1.6 gigahertz signal wasn't just a burst anymore, it was a sustained focused beam originating from the bottom of the shaft and aimed directly at the probe. It knows we're here, Leo whispered. Passing 600 feet, the operator announced. Approaching the breach point. The tension in the command center was a physical force. We were all holding our breath. The camera feed showed the last few feet of striated rock and then nothing. The screen went black. Have we lost the camera? I asked, my heart sinking. No, Leo replied, his fingers flying across his keyboard. Light levels are 0. The camera is functioning, but it's seeing absolute darkness. I'm cranking the gain to maximum. The image flickered, then resolved into a grainy, washed-out gray. But there was still nothing to see. It was like looking into a void. Okay, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The camera's blind. What are the other sensors telling us? Evelyn was pale. Eris. The readings are impossible. Temperature is near absolute 0. Atmospheric pressure is a near-perfect vacuum. But the radiation count, it's equivalent to the heart of a nuclear reactor. Gamma rays, high-energy neutrons. Orpheus's shielding is holding, but it's being bombarded. A vacuum colder than deep space, yet flooded with lethal radiation. A place of absolute contradictions. Activate the active sensors I ordered. LiDAR and sonar. Let's paint a picture of the room. Leo complied. On a separate monitor, a 3D grid appeared. We watched as the LiDAR's laser beams and the sonar's acoustic pulses shot out from the probe's location, represented as a small green dot. We expected to see them map the boundaries of the dome to give us the shape of the cavern, but the signals never returned. There's no reflection, Leo said, his voice a mixture of confusion and fear. The signals are going out, but they're not bouncing off anything. It's like the space is infinite, or it's absorbing every photon and sound wave we throw at it. A light-absorbing, sound-absorbing, infinitely large space buried in a mountain. My mind reeled. This wasn't a cavern, it was a hole in reality. Then the infrasound changed. For months, it had been a steady monolithic pulse. Now it began to modulate. The simple beat fractured into a complex series of overlapping frequencies, a cascade of deep, resonant tones. It was no longer a heartbeat. It was a voice. It's responding to the active scan, Evelyn said, her eyes wide. It's talking back. The new signal was incredibly complex, a torrent of information encoded in subsonic waves. Our systems were recording it, but deciphering it would take weeks. Keep recording, I said. Can we get any kind of visual switch to the thermal imager? Leo changed the feed. The screen remained black for a moment, then a single faint object resolved in the center of the display. It was a perfect sphere glowing with a cold internal light on the thermal spectrum. It hung suspended in the center of the void, directly below the borehole. It was the source of the radiation, the source of the infrasound. As we stared mesmerized, a thin black line bisected the sphere. An opening, an iris, an eye. The eye of the needle, and it was looking right at us. The infrasound signal stopped. A new sound came through the speakers, a high-frequency tone that rapidly climbed the scale beyond the range of our equipment, beyond the range of hearing. "Pull it out," I screamed. Now, the winch operator slammed his controls into reverse. The armored cable went taut, but the depth indicator wasn't moving. "It's not coming up," he yelled. "Something has it. The strain on the cable is at maximum." On the screen, the thermal image of the sphere began to glow brighter, hotter. The eye widened. "The cable is snapping." A deafening crack echoed from the winch mechanism. The tension gauge dropped to 0. The fiber optic feed went dead. Orpheus was gone. Silence descended upon the command center, broken only by the frantic beeping of a radiation alarm from Evelyn's station. "Eris," she said, her voice a strained whisper. "Look." She pointed to her monitor, which was tracking a live feed from a gamma-ray detector on the mesa's surface. A thin, tightly focused beam of intense radiation was now shooting straight up from the borehole, a lethal fountain aimed at the sky. We had knocked on the door and the thing inside had answered, and in doing so, it had just turned our borehole into the barrel of a gun. Chapter 8, The Weapon Panic, is a cold, sharp thing. It bypassed all my training, all my scientific discipline, and went straight for the primal core. The image of that lethal, invisible beam of radiation slicing up into the atmosphere was an image of absolute terror. "Evacuate the mesa." Now Kestrel's voice boomed over the comms, a commander's bark that cut through the shocked silence. "All personnel, get to the chopper. Leave the equipment. Go." There was a scramble of motion. Grizzly and his crew, hardened men who had seen it all, didn't hesitate. They abandoned their multi-million-dollar rig and ran for the helicopter landing zone. On the command center screens, we saw their figures fleeing from the unseen threat. "Evelyn, what are we looking at?" I demanded, my voice shaking slightly. "What is that beam?" She was already working her fingers a blur on her keyboard, pulling data from the surviving sensors. "It's a collimated gamma-ray beam, tightly focused, almost no divergence. The energy readings are astronomical. It's not a particle beam, it's coherent light, a gracer, a gamma-ray laser." My blood ran cold. A gracer was a theoretical weapon, a staple of science fiction. The physics required to build one were thought to be decades, if not centuries, beyond our grasp. It would require an energy source of unprecedented power and density. The sphere I breathe, it's a power source and a weapon. "And we just gave it a perfectly aimed barrel," she finished, her face grim. Kestrel's voice cut in again, this time from the cockpit of the departing helicopter. "Command Dragon is airborne with all MESA personnel. We are clear of the immediate area. What's the status of that beam?" "It's stable," Evelyn reported, her voice regaining its professional calm. "It's aimed at zenith, straight up. No deviation. Any risk to air traffic satellites?" "Civilian air traffic flies at 4,000 feet. This beam will pass through that altitude in a microsecond. The atmospheric absorption at that level is negligible. They won't feel a thing. Satellites in low Earth orbit, however." She paused, running a quick calculation. "If a satellite passes directly through the beam, its electronics will be fried instantly. The odds are low, but not zero. NORAD is going to have a very bad day trying to figure out why one of their spy satellites just went dark." A thought struck me, a horrifying possibility. What if it changes its aim? The command center fell silent again. The implications of that question were unthinkable. A steerable gamma-ray laser operated by an unknown intelligence was now active on U.S. soil. It could target anything on the ground, in the air, or in orbit with pinpoint accuracy and a level of destructive power that made a nuclear bomb look like a firecracker. We had come to Serpent Ridge seeking knowledge. We had found a weapon of mass destruction. "Leo," I said, my voice low and urgent, "I want every satellite image you can get of this area starting now. I want to know if anyone else is watching that beam. Kestrel, lock down the ranch. No one in, no one out. Go to full defensive posture. The watchers, they're not just going to sit back and observe this. Already on it, Kestrel's voice crackled back. We're dark. All external lights are out. Perimeter teams are on high alert. The mood in the command center had shifted from scientific discovery to crisis management. We were no longer scientists. We were the unwilling guardians of a sleeping dragon we had accidentally prodded awake. And it was now breathing a silent, invisible fire into the heavens. Hours passed. The gamma-ray beam remained steady, a constant, terrifying pillar of energy. We monitored it, tracked it, studied it from the relative safety of the command center a mile away. The initial panic subsided, replaced by a grim, focused determination. Around 2:00 a.m. Leo got a hit. Eris, you need to see this, he said, his voice tense. He pulled up a real-time satellite image on the main screen. It was a thermal overlay. The ranch was a cool blue, but the top of the mesa glowed with a faint heat signature from the beam's interaction with the rock. Not that Leo said. Look here. He pointed to a spot on the ridge just outside the ranch's southern fence line, the same spot where Kestrel had seen the watchers during the winter. Two tiny bright white heat signatures had appeared, vehicles. They're back, I whispered. And they're not alone, Leo added, panning the image eastward along the public road. Another pair of heat signatures, and another, a convoy. Kestrel's voice came over the internal comms, low and dangerous. My perimeter team has eyes on them. 6 vehicles, black SUVs, no markings. They're deploying personnel, men in black tactical gear. They're setting up a perimeter of their own outside ours. The watchers were no longer content to watch from a distance. They were moving in. They were establishing a cordon. The ranch, our isolated laboratory, had just become a siege camp, and we were trapped inside, caught between a hostile force of unknown origin on the outside and a cosmic power of unimaginable scale raging beneath our feet. The quickening had begun. Chapter 9, The Siege of Serpent Ridge. The arrival of the watchers changed the game completely. Their silent, efficient blockade transformed the ranch from a research outpost into a pressure cooker. We were cut off, isolated. The single dirt road leading to the main gate was now controlled by men in black, their unmarked SUVs forming an impassable barrier. Kestrel was in his element. The command center, already a hub of scientific data, became a war room. He had drone feeds, thermal cameras, and reports from his small, highly trained security team painting a comprehensive picture of the external threat. They're professionals, he reported during our dawn briefing, his face illuminated by the glow of a dozen monitors, ex-military by the look of their movements. They haven't made any hostile moves, but their posture is clear. They are containing the situation. They're treating us as part of the problem. Can they get in? I asked. A grim smile touched Kestrel's lips. They can try. This is my house. They'll find it unwelcoming. While Kestrel managed the tactical situation, Evelyn, Leo, and I were locked in a desperate battle of our own, a battle for understanding. The gamma-ray beam was still active, a silent testament to the power we had unleashed. But it was the other signal, the complex infrasound data packet we had recorded in the moments before Orpheus was destroyed, that held our complete attention. If the beam is its voice of anger, I reasoned, then this infrasound was its attempt at a conversation. It was responding to our probe, to our active scan. It was a data dump. Leo had loaded the terabytes of infrasound data into the ranch's new AI system, a powerful machine learning platform we'd christened Athena. For 2 days, Athena churned through the complex overlapping frequencies, searching for patterns, for structure, for anything that resembled language. The initial results were gibberish. It's not language in any human sense, Leo said, frustrated, pointing to a swirling, chaotic visualization on the screen. There's no syntax, no grammar we can recognize. Then we're looking for the wrong thing. Evelyn countered, her eyes alight with an idea. She walked to the screen. Stop looking for language, Leo. Look for mathematics. It's the only universal constant. Run the signal through a Fourier analysis. Break it down into its constituent sine waves. Let's see the base components. Leo's fingers danced across the keyboard. The chaotic swirl on the screen resolved into a breathtakingly elegant series of distinct harmonic frequencies. It was a chord played on an instrument the size of a mountain. Look at the ratios between the frequencies, Evelyn urged, her voice trembling with excitement. That one is 1. That's our fundamental. The next is at 1.618. The next at 2.718. Then 3.141. My jaw dropped. Phi, the golden ratio. Euler's number. Pi. They were fundamental mathematical constants, the building blocks of the universe encoded in a subsonic symphony. It's a Rosetta Stone, I whispered in awe. It's teaching us its language, and its language is pure math. Over the next 24 hours, we worked in a frenzy. With the mathematical key provided by the constants, Athena began to unlock the rest of the data packet. The signal wasn't a conversation, it was a library, an encyclopedia of a reality profoundly different from our own. Geometric proofs for theorems our best mathematicians had yet to solve flowed across the screen. Chemical diagrams for stable elements far beyond the limits of our periodic table. And then came the star charts. At first, they were unrecognizable, constellations that didn't exist in our night sky. But Leo, overlaying them with our own astronomical data, found a match. It's not our sky, he said, zooming in on a dense cluster of stars. It's the sky as seen from the Large Magellanic Cloud, 1,600,000 light years away. But that's not the strangest part. He pointed to a specific point in the chart, a spot that in our telescopes appeared as empty space. In the anomaly star chart, this point was circled. And emanating from it were complex diagrams showing gravitational waveforms. It's showing us a black hole, I said, leaning closer to the screen, a supermassive one. But why circle it? Why is it important? Evelyn was running the coordinates through the global network of astronomical observatories. There's no known black hole at those exact coordinates, Eris, she said. But there is something. An extreme gravitational lensing event. Light from a distant quasar is being bent around. Something. Something invisible, but with the mass of 1 billion suns. The pieces clicked into place with a sudden gut-wrenching clarity. The wormhole at the triangle, the dimensional superposition, the star chart pointing to a massive invisible object in another galaxy. It's the other end, I said, my voice barely audible. That's the other mouth of the wormhole. The anomaly here at Serpent Ridge isn't just a gateway, it's an anchor. A stabilizer for an interstellar bridge connecting our world to a supermassive object 1,600,000 light years away. The sheer scale of it was almost too much to comprehend. We were ants who had stumbled upon the gear mechanism of a cosmic clock. Our moment of revelation was broken by a sharp alarm from Kestrel's tactical station. "We've got movement," he announced, his voice tight. "Perimeter breach, Sector Gamma, one of their teams is coming over the fence. They're moving fast." The Watchers were done waiting. They were coming for the anomaly. Part 4, Contact Chapter 10, The Incursion. The command center, once a sanctuary of scientific inquiry, instantly became a combat information center. The awe of our cosmic discovery was shattered by the brutal reality of the tactical map. A dozen red icons representing the breaching team were moving swiftly and silently through the rugged terrain of Sector Gamma. "They're good," Kestrel murmured, his eyes narrowed, tracking their progress. "No lights. Perfect interval spacing. They're using the terrain for cover. These aren't just soldiers. They're ghosts." He keyed his radio. "Talon 1, do you have a visual?" The voice of his lead perimeter guard, a former Marine Scout sniper, crackled back. "Negative Dragon. They're using some kind of personal stealth tech. I can't get a thermal or night vision lock. I can only see the brush moving where they ought to be. It's like watching Predator. Technology that could blind military-grade sensors. The Watchers weren't just well-equipped. They were operating on a level we hadn't anticipated. The red icons converged on a single point, Homestead 2, the old abandoned ranch house that sat on a low rise, offering a clear line of sight to both the command center and the mesa. It was the most strategic position on the ranch. "They're not coming for us," I realized aloud. "They're going for the high ground. They're setting up an observation post or a command and control node." "My thoughts exactly," Kestrel said. He pointed to a set of blue icons on the map. "My team is already there. They're waiting inside." The confrontation was inevitable. A tense silence fell over the command center as we watched the red icons merge with the blue icon representing the homestead. For a moment, there was nothing. Then a single curt report from Talon 1. "We have contact. They're not hostile. They're waiting." "What do you mean waiting?" Kestrel demanded. "They walked right up to our position, sir, lowered their weapons. One of them is stepping forward, wants to talk. He's asking for you, Dr. Thorne, by name." A chill went down my spine. This was no random military unit. They knew who we were. "No way," Kestrel said immediately. "Eris, you are not going out there. It's a trap." "What choice do we have?" I countered. "They haven't opened fire. They're asking to parley. If we refuse, they'll see it as an act of aggression. We need to know who they are and what they want." Evelyn sided with Kestrel. "He's right, Eris. It's too dangerous. We are civilians. This is a military matter." This stopped being a purely military matter. The second that Gracer Beam switched on, I argued, my voice rising. This is a first contact scenario, whether we like it or not. And right now, the only beings we're in contact with are human. We have to take that chance. The debate was cut short by a sudden violent change in the environment. The lights in the command center flickered violently. A low, gut-wrenching hum filled the air, the same infrasound frequency from the mesa, but now it was audible, palpable, making our teeth ache. "What's happening?" Leo shouted over the din. Evelyn was at her station, her face pale. "It's the Gracer. The energy output is fluctuating wildly. The magnetic field is destabilizing." On the main screen, the live feed from the mesa's radiation monitor showed the beam pulsing like a frantic beacon. The steady column of energy had become a chaotic strobe. The anomaly was reacting to the incursion. It sensed the new players on the board, and it was agitated. "This decides it," I said, grabbing my heavy coat. "The anomaly is getting unstable. The longer this standoff continues, the greater the risk of a catastrophic event. It might not be able to differentiate between us and them. It might just decide to sterilize the entire area." I looked at Kestrel. I'm going, "You can cover me, but I have to talk to him." Kestrel stared at me for a long moment, his jaw tight. He hated it, but he saw the logic. "Fine," he grunted. "But you'll wear an earpiece. You'll be covered by my best sniper." The man so much as flinches, and this parley is over. "Understood." "Understood," I replied. As I walked towards the door, the building vibrating around me, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was overshadowed by an overwhelming sense of purpose. We were on the precipice of a new era of human history, and I had been chosen by chance or by design to be one of the first to step into it. The night air was cold and electric. The humming from the mesa was a physical pressure, a force pushing against my chest. Accompanied by two of Kestrel's guards, I drove the ATV towards Homestead 2, its headlights cutting a lonely path through the darkness. The ranch I had come to know so well felt alien a battlefield under the silent watch of a million stars. The cosmic drama was unfolding, and we were all just players on its stage. Chapter 11. The Devil's Chessboard Homestead 2 stood silhouetted against the pulsing sky, its windows dark and empty. As we approached, I could see them. A dozen figures clad in matte black tactical gear that seemed to drink the light. They held weapons that were vaguely familiar in shape, but subtly wrong, with no visible magazines or ejection ports. They moved with a liquid grace that was both beautiful and terrifying. My two guards fanned out, taking up defensive positions, their conventional rifles, looking like antiques against the Watcher's advanced hardware. I walked forward alone into the 100-foot space between our lines. A single figure detached itself from the group and walked to meet me. He was tall, lean, and moved with the easy confidence of a predator. His face was hidden behind a polarized helmet, but I could feel the intensity of his gaze. "Dr. Eris Thorne," he said. His voice was calm, modulated by his helmet speaker, devoid of any discernible accent. "I am designated Argus. Thank you for coming. We need to talk." "You have a strange way of asking for a meeting," I replied, my own voice steadier than I expected. "My team is under the impression that we're under siege." "A necessary precaution," Argus said, his head tilting slightly towards the mesa where the sky continued its frantic, silent strobing. "The asset has become unstable. We are here to contain it." "The asset," I repeated, a surge of anger cutting through my fear. "You call that thing an asset? It's the most profound discovery in human history. It's not a piece of hardware to be contained." "On the contrary," Dr. Argus replied smoothly, "it is precisely a piece of hardware, an artifact left behind by a civilization that has long since departed this galaxy. We have been monitoring it for 75 years. It has remained dormant stable. Your team's enthusiastic drilling has changed that. You have activated its automated defense system." 75 years, the implications were staggering. While the world had been chasing flying saucers and blurry photos, this group had been engaged in a covert, decades-long study of a cosmic artifact. "Who are you?" I asked the question, hanging in the vibrating air. Argus was silent for a moment. "We are the Custodians, a multinational non-governmental organization dedicated to the study and containment of non-terrestrial artifacts. We are the thin line between your world of blissful ignorance and a universe that is far older, far stranger, and far more dangerous than you can possibly imagine." As he spoke, his soldiers began to deploy devices from their packs, small tripod-mounted cylinders that they placed in a wide circle around the homestead. As each one was activated, it emitted a low hum. In my earpiece, Evelyn's voice was a frantic whisper. "Eris, their technology. It's incredible. They're generating localized quantum foam stabilization fields. It's theoretical tech impossible by our standards. They're creating pockets of normal space-time, shielding themselves from the anomaly's influence. They hadn't just come prepared, they had come with a playbook written by physicists a century ahead of our own." What do you want? I asked Argus, my mind reeling. Full control of this facility and all your data, he stated, his tone, leaving no room for negotiation. My team will take over the containment of the asset. Your team will be debriefed and relocated. You want to kick us out, I said, incredulous. We're the ones who deciphered its language. We're the ones who are on the verge of understanding it. You are the ones who broke it, he countered, his voice losing its placid tone for the first time. You are children playing with a stellar engine. The Gracer beam is just the first line of defense. If the core destabilizes further, it will attempt a full reality purge within a 500-mile radius. It will unwrite everything from existence. We are here to prevent that. The humming from the mesa intensified. The strobing in the sky became faster, more erratic. A new sound joined the chorus, a high-pitched tearing noise like the fabric of space itself was being ripped apart. The dimensional interference is spiking, Evelyn yelled in my ear. The wormhole at the triangle, it's flaring. On the ground between us and Argus's team, the air began to shimmer like heat haze on a summer road. But it wasn't heat. The temperature was dropping rapidly. A circle of frost began to spread across the dirt. Argus and his team took a step back, their weapons raised. My guards did the same. What is that? I breathed. A bleed through Argus set his voice tight with urgency. The barrier between realities is thinning. Your conversation has drawn its attention, and now the presence of my team is aggravating it further. It perceives us all as a threat. In the center of the shimmering circle, the darkness seemed to coalesce. It wasn't just a lack of light, it was a patch of active, hungry nothingness. From its center, a shape began to emerge. Tall, impossibly thin, with limbs that bent at angles that were grotesquely wrong for any terrestrial biology. It was a silhouette of pure black against the night, a hole in the shape of a creature. One of Argus's soldiers, despite his advanced gear and training, panicked. He raised his weapon and fired. A bolt of blue-white energy, silent and brilliant, shot from the rifle and struck the creature in the chest. There was no impact. The energy bolt simply vanished, absorbed into the creature's non-body. The creature turned its head. It had no face, no eyes, but we all felt its gaze fall upon the soldier who had fired. It raised a long, spindly arm. The air around the soldier began to distort, to warp. He screamed a choked, terrified sound that was cut off abruptly. And then he was gone. Not dead, not vaporized. He was simply gone. His comrades stared at the empty space where he had been standing a second before. The devil's chessboard had a new player, and it wasn't taking sides. Chapter 12, The Chorus. The unmaking of Argus's soldier was a catalyst. The fragile truce shattered into a million pieces of primal fear. The stalemate was over. This was now a battle for survival. Fall back. Argus commanded his professional calm, finally breaking. All units fall back to the perimeter. Form a defensive circle. His team retreated with disciplined speed, their advanced weapons now aimed at the shimmering portal and the nightmarish creature it had birthed. The creature, for its part, remained motionless, a silent black sentinel. But the portal behind it was growing the circle of frost, widening with every passing second. Eris, get back here now, Kestrel's voice roared in my ear. My guards were already pulling me back towards the ATV. My mind, however, was elsewhere. I was staring at the mesa, at the chaotic light show playing out in the heavens above it. Argus was right. We had broken it. Our clumsy probing had turned a stable cosmic machine into a cornered, terrified animal. And now it was lashing out at everything. It can't differentiate, I said to Evelyn through the comms as we sped back to the command center. It sees us. It sees Argus's team. It just perceives a threat and reacts. The creature, the Gracer, it's all just an immune response. An immune response that can erase people from existence. She shot back, her voice frayed with terror. We have to get out of here. There is no out, I said, my mind racing, piecing together the desperate fragments of a plan. Argus's people have us boxed in, and the anomaly has us in a kill zone. Running isn't an option. Fighting is suicide. That leaves one choice. Which is what? Communication, I said. We can't talk to Argus, but we might still be able to talk to the machine. Back in the relative safety of the command center, the atmosphere was thick with dread. Kestrel was directing his teams preparing for a siege. Leo was monitoring the portal, which was now 30 feet in diameter, and spitting out smaller, shadow-like entities that skittered across the ground. Evelyn was tracking the catastrophic energy fluctuations from the mesa. It's building to something, she warned, pointing to a graph that was climbing vertically. The core is approaching a critical energy state. Argus's reality purge, he wasn't exaggerating. We have minutes, maybe an hour at most. I walked to the main console where Athena was still displaying the elegant harmonic structure of the infrasound signal. the Rosetta Stone, the mathematical language. That signal was a library, a peaceful data dump, I said, thinking aloud. It only became aggressive when we didn't respond, and it captured Orpheus. It escalated. The Gracer, the portal. It's screaming at us because we're not listening. How do you propose we listen? Kestrel demanded, not taking his eyes off the tactical map. We don't listen, I replied. We sing back, in its own language. The plan was born of sheer desperation. We couldn't send another probe down the borehole. The Gracer would obliterate it. But the borehole was still an open channel, a direct line to the sphere in the heart of the machine. We can't send a physical object, but we can send a signal, I explained. A high-powered directional radio transmission aimed directly at the mouth of the borehole. We can modulate the carrier wave with the same infrasound frequencies it sent us. We can replicate its mathematical chord. Evelyn stared at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and dawning comprehension. You want to broadcast a signal directly into a critically unstable planet-killing weapon? Yes, I said, but not just any signal. We're going to send it the Rosetta Stone sequence, Phi Euler's number pi, the fundamentals it used to introduce itself. It will recognize the structure. It will know it's a deliberate communication. I paused, taking a deep breath before delivering the riskiest part of the idea. And we're going to introduce a single, intentional error. Leo spun around in his chair. An error. Why? Because perfection can be natural, I explained. A perfect signal might be dismissed as an echo, a reflection of its own broadcast. But imperfection is the signature of intelligence. We're going to broadcast the value of pi to 16 decimal places, but we're going to get the last digit wrong. It's a test. If it's just a dumb machine, it won't notice. But if it's a true intelligence, it will have to correct us. It's the cosmological equivalent of a spelling mistake. It's a way to prove we are sentient thinking beings, not just a random stimulus. For a long moment, the only sound in the command center was the hum of the servers and the distant tearing sound from outside. It's the most insane idea I've ever heard, Evelyn said softly. It might interpret the wrong number as a corruption, a virus. It could make things infinitely worse. What's worse than total annihilation? I shot back. I looked at Kestrel. He was the commander. The final decision was his. He stared at the tactical map where the shadow creatures were now engaging Argus's perimeter. He looked at Evelyn's screen at the terrifying graph climbing towards infinity. Do it, he said, his voice. A low growl. Leo, how fast can you get that transmitter online? Leo's hands were already a blur. The main satellite communication dish is directional. I can bypass the safety protocols and use it to generate a focused microwave beam. I can piggyback the infrasound signal onto it. 5 minutes, maybe less. As Leo worked, a thought struck me. Evelyn, the UAPs, the small orbs, they're part of the anomaly's immune system, right? Presumably, she said. Autonomous drones, perhaps. Are they still active? Leo pulled up a radar map. More than ever, there's a swarm of them over the mesa. Hundreds of them. They're flying in a strange circular pattern, almost like a holding pattern. They're the anomaly's antibodies, I mused. But they haven't attacked us or Argus's team directly. Why? Maybe they're waiting for instructions, Evelyn suggested. From the core. The pieces were falling into place. We weren't just trying to calm the beast, we were trying to take control of its defenses. Ready, Leo announced, his face bathed in the green glow of the console. Transmitter is online. I've aimed it at the borehole. I have the mathematical chorus queued up with your creative spelling of pi. He looked at me, his young face etched with a fear that went far beyond his years. Are we really doing this, Eris? I looked at the chaos unfolding on our monitors. The faceless soldiers, the shadow creatures, the raging storm in the sky. Our humanity was caught between two overwhelming inhuman forces. Our only hope was to choose a side. We are, I said, my voice resolute. We're choosing a side, and we're praying to God it's the right one. I nodded to Leo. Transmit the signal. With a click of a mouse, our tiny, flawed, defiantly human voice shouted into the heart of a god. Chapter 13, the reply for 3.141592653589792 seconds. The duration of our flawed transmission of pi, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Nothing happened. The Gracer beam still pulsed. The portal still shimmered. The shadow creatures still skittered across the battlefield. My heart sank. It had failed. It was too little, too late. Then everything stopped. It wasn't a gradual cessation. It was a sudden absolute stop, as if a cosmic switch had been thrown. The deafening hum from the mesa vanished. The tearing sound from the portal ceased. The chaotic strobing of the Gracer beam condensed into a single, steady, silent pillar of light. The shadow creatures froze in place, becoming inert statues of darkness. The silence that descended was more profound, more shocking than the preceding chaos. What? What just happened? Leo whispered, his hands hovering over his keyboard. It hurt us. Evelyn breathed, her eyes glued to her energy level monitor. The terrifyingly steep curve on her graph had flatlined, holding steady at a high but stable level. It's listening. On the tactical map, the battle had frozen. We could see Argus's soldiers equally stunned, staring at the motionless shadow creatures. And then it replied. The reply didn't come through our speakers or on our screens. It came from within. It was a wave of pure comprehension that washed through the command center, a silent broadcast that bypassed our senses and imprinted itself directly onto our consciousness. It was the feeling of 1,000,000 years of loneliness suddenly broken. It was the feeling of a vast, ancient, and impossibly powerful intelligence turning its full attention for the first time upon the flickering candle of human thought. With the feeling came a single perfect stream of information, a correction. On Leo's console, a new string of digits began to type itself across the screen, overwriting his own code. 3.141552659353. The correct final digit, followed by 1,000 more, 1,000,000 more. Pi, unfurling to a degree of precision that would take our supercomputers years to calculate, was being dictated to us in an instant. It had understood, it had recognized our intelligence, our fallibility, and it had answered the test. My God, I whispered, a tear tracing a path through the grime on my cheek. We did it. We're talking to it. The reply wasn't just mathematical. It was conceptual. Images, ideas, and emotions that were not my own flooded my mind. I saw the birth of stars and nebulae of impossible beauty. I felt the slow, patient grief of a machine left to stand guard over a silent bridge for eons. I understood its purpose. It wasn't a weapon. It was a sentinel. A gatekeeper designed to protect our reality from the things that lay on the other side of the portal, the shadow creatures, the bleed-throughs, which it called echoes of chaotic geometries. Our drilling hadn't been an attack. It had been a key in a lock it had forgotten existed. We had woken it from its long slumber, and in its confusion and fear, it had activated all of its defenses at once, unable to distinguish between the keepers of the key and the terrors at the gate. Our signal, our flawed, imperfect song, had given it context. It now understood what we were. The change was not just in our minds, it was happening outside. Eris, look at the radar, Leo shouted, pointing to the screen. The swarm of UAP orbs, which had been holding in a pattern high above the mesa, was descending, but they weren't coming towards us. They were moving with incredible speed and precision towards the shimmering portal at Homestead 2. They moved like a school of silver fish, a river of light in the night sky. As they reached the portal, they didn't attack the shadow creatures. They did something far more incredible. They began to weave themselves into the fabric of the portal itself. Each orb was a needle, and together they were stitching the wound in reality closed. We watched in stunned silence as the UAPs flew in and out of the shimmering air, their movements creating a complex, luminous tapestry. With each pass, the portal shrank. The inert shadow creatures began to dissolve, fading back into the nothingness from which they had come. The tall, slender creature, the first one to emerge, was the last to go. It turned its featureless head towards the command center, and for a fleeting instant, I felt not malice, but a kind of weary resignation before it, too, was unwritten by the closing gate. Within minutes, it was over. The portal was gone. The shimmering air was still. The only thing left on the frosted ground of Homestead 2 was the silent, black-clad team of Argus's custodians staring at the sky, where the silver swarm was now ascending its work done. The Gracer beam, the Sentinel's angry roar, finally went silent. The pillar of light emanating from the borehole faded and died. The long night was over. A new voice, this one all too human, crackled in my earpiece. It was Argus. The modulated, superior tone was gone, replaced by one of pure, unadulterated disbelief. Thorn, what have you done? I took a deep, shuddering breath, the weight of the last few hours crashing down on me. I looked at the data stream of Pi still scrolling on Leo's screen, a gift from a god. I looked at Evelyn, her face, a mask of scientific rapture. I looked at Kestrel, who was slowly lowering his sidearm, a look of grudging respect in his eyes. We introduced ourselves, I said. Chapter 14, The New Custodians. The dawn that broke over Serpent Ridge was the dawn of a new world. The air was still cleansed of the oppressive energy that had saturated it. The siege was over. The Watchers, Argus's custodians, were in disarray. Their advanced technology had failed them. Their decades of observation had been rendered obsolete in a single night. They had tried to contain a force of nature. We had learned to speak to it. The standoff at Homestead 2 ended not with a bang, but with a quiet, tense meeting in the rising Sunday. Argus, his helmet now removed to reveal a severe, intelligent face etched with exhaustion, met me halfway. His soldiers kept their distance, as did Kestrel's. Your data, he said, his voice raw. I need to see everything you've recorded. The infrasound signal, the transmission, all of it. And in return, I asked. You have my word that my organization will stand down, he replied. We will not interfere with your work. For 75 years, we have been the custodians. It is clear that title no longer belongs to us. It belongs to you. He looked past me towards the silent mesa. You are no longer just studying it, Doctor. You are its ambassador. It was a total capitulation. He understood on a fundamental level that the paradigm had shifted. The key to Serpent Ridge wasn't force or containment. It was communication based on the universal language of mathematics. In the days that followed, a strange new symbiosis emerged. Argus and his team, with their superior resources and technology, became our partners. They maintained the outer cordon, securing the ranch not to keep us in, but to keep the rest of the world out. They shared their historical data, a treasure trove of 75 years of passive observation that, when combined with our active communication, began to paint an even richer picture of the Sentinel's nature. We learned its name, not in words, but in a complex mathematical concept that Evelyn translated as the Weaver. It was not a being in the biological sense, but a vast, artificially intelligent quantum consciousness. It was, as Argus had said, an artifact, a piece of technology left behind by a race we now called the Architects. The Weaver's purpose was to maintain the integrity of the interstellar bridge, and by extension, the local reality of our solar system. The bleed-throughs were a constant threat, a natural entropic decay of the dimensional boundaries. The Weaver and its swarm of UAP drones were the gardeners constantly pruning and repairing the fabric of space-time. Our drilling had been like a needle jabbed into the brain of a sleeping giant. The resulting chaos was an autonomic, undifferentiated response. But our mathematical song had woken it up to our presence, allowing it to reclassify us from threat to local intelligence. We were no longer just observers. We were part of the system. Our work shifted from provocation to conversation. Using the satellite dish, we began a slow, careful dialogue with the Weaver. We sent it prime numbers. It replied with the atomic structure of elements we had yet to discover. We sent it the Fibonacci sequence. It replied with a simulation of the formation of a spiral galaxy. Each exchange was a revelation, a gift of knowledge that would accelerate human science by 1,000 years. But our new role came with a heavy burden. We were now the guardians of a secret that would shatter every religion, every government, every sense of human identity. We were also the first line of defense. The portal at the Triangle, we learned, was not the only one. The Weaver showed us a map of a dozen other thin spots on Earth, places where the echoes of chaotic geometries could potentially break through. Serpent Ridge was the main junction, but it was not unique. The final chapter of our first season at the ranch concluded not with an explosion or a battle, but with a choice. Marcus Vance, our benefactor, flew in his face, a mixture of awe and trepidation at what his investment had yielded. The world is not ready for this, Eris, he said as we stood on the mesa, the ground beneath our feet, humming with a gentle sleeping power. To reveal this now would cause chaos, panic war. I agree, I said. But we can't keep it a secret forever. And Argus's group won't be the only ones who notice what's happening here. The secret is already starting to get out. Then we must prepare them, Marcus said, his eyes filled with a new profound sense of purpose. We will use the knowledge the Weaver gives us. We will seed the world with new technologies, new physics, new ideas. We will slowly, carefully raise the scientific and philosophical level of the entire species. We will prepare humanity, not for an invasion, but for a graduation. And so Project Chimera changed. It was no longer a mission to find answers for ourselves, but a mission to prepare the world for the answer we had found. I often think back to that first day, chasing the ghost of a light I had seen as a child. I had come to Serpent Ridge looking for aliens for a ship, for proof that we were not alone. I found something infinitely more complex and infinitely more important. We are not alone in the universe, that much is true. But the great cosmic truth is not just that there are others out there. It's that we are all and always have been connected. Part V, The Echoes of Tomorrow, Chapter 15, The Unspoken Variable. 6 months after what we came to call the Chorus Serpent Ridge was transformed. The rustic, almost haphazard collection of trailers and homesteads had been replaced by a state-of-the-art semi-subterranean facility built with the startling speed and efficiency of Argus's organization. Our alliance, forged in the crucible of a potential apocalypse, had solidified into a powerful, albeit uneasy partnership. Project Chimera was now the joint Chimera Custodian Initiative, the best-kept and most important secret on Earth. The Mesa was quiet. The Weaver's resting heartbeat was a steady, reassuring presence in our lives. Our conversations with it continued slow, patient, and profound. We were its students, learning the true structure of the cosmos, one mathematical concept at a time. The knowledge was intoxicating, but also terrifying in its implications. Evelyn had already drafted theoretical papers on zero-point energy and gravity manipulation that would make Einstein look like a schoolboy. We kept them locked in the deepest, most secure vault on the facility. The greatest change, however, was the human one. Our small, tight-knit team was now integrated with Argus's personnel. They were disciplined, brilliant, and utterly dedicated, but they were also zealots. They viewed the Weaver with a kind of religious reverence that made me uncomfortable. To them, it was a holy relic to be guarded. To us, it was a colleague to be understood. This friction was personified in Dr. Alani Hassan. She was Argus's top analyst, a brilliant polymath with doctorates in xenolinguistics, semiotics, and computational theory. She was brought in to formalize our conversation with the Weaver, to turn our intuitive experimental approach into a rigid, structured protocol. You cannot simply sing to it. Dr. Thorne, she told me during one of our first tense meetings, her dark eyes sharp and critical. Every transmission must be logged, vetted, and analyzed for potential threat vectors. You are treating a superintelligence like a pen pal. It is an unacceptable risk. Our pen pal relationship is the only reason we're all not a memory, I retorted. The Weaver responds to intelligence, to creativity. Your protocols will bore it back into a defensive state. Our philosophical debate was cut short by an urgent summons from the new operations center. It was a vast circular room dominated by a holographic map of the Earth suspended in its center. Kestrel, now the joint head of security with Argus's second-in-command, was standing before the globe, his face grim. "We have a problem," he said, pointing to a blinking red icon over the vast white emptiness of Siberia. "This is Site 12, one of the thin spots the Weaver identified. It's a custodian listening post." Or it was. It went completely dark 48 hours ago. Argus, who was monitoring the meeting remotely, his face a stern mask on a nearby screen, confirmed. The last transmission from Site 12 was a garbled data burst containing high-level dimensional interference readings. Then silence. A reconnaissance drone sent to the location failed to return. Evelyn brought up the satellite data on another screen. There's a thermal anomaly at the location. A 50-square-mile area where the ground temperature is nearly 20 degrees Celsius above the surrounding permafrost. And the atmospheric composition shows trace elements of, well, nothing I can identify. The map of a dozen thin spots the Weaver had given us had always been an abstraction, a theoretical danger. Now it was horrifyingly real. One of them was waking up. "The Weaver's UAP swarm," I said, turning to the holographic globe. "Are they reacting?" Leo, now heading the joint data science team, shook his head. Negative. They remain localized here at Serpent Ridge. It's like this one isn't its responsibility, or it can't reach that far. The implication was terrifying. The Weaver was a local gardener, not a global policeman. The other thin spots were vulnerabilities without a guardian. "A decision has to be made," Argus's voice echoed in the chamber. "The custodian charter is to contain. My recommendation is to dispatch a team with a tactical quantum device to neutralize the area, to collapse the instability before it can spread." "You want to nuke it with a physics bomb we don't even understand," I exclaimed. "Without knowing what's causing it, we could make it 1,000 times worse. We could tear a permanent hole in our reality." "And your alternative," Dr. Argus challenged. Singing to it from 10,000 miles away, a heavy silence fell over the room. We were at a crossroads. For 6 months, we had been students, translators. Now we were being asked to become soldiers, to put our newfound, terrifying knowledge into practice. "There is an alternative," I said, my gaze meeting Kestrel's across the room. "We go there. We find out what's happening. We take what we've learned here, and we apply it there. We don't just have a duty to study this phenomenon anymore. We have a duty to manage it." Marcus Vance, who had been listening silently from the corner, finally spoke. His voice was quiet but carried the immense weight of his authority. "Eris is right. This is our responsibility now. The Chimera Custodian Initiative is not a think tank. It is Earth's first line of defense against a universe we are only just beginning to understand." He looked from me to Argus. "Put a team together. I want our best people on the ground." The unspoken variable in our grand cosmic equation had just been solved. Our mission was no longer just about Serpent Ridge. It was about the entire planet. And our first test was waiting for us in the frozen heart of Siberia. Chapter 16, The Siberian Silence. The Antonov cargo plane, a relic of the Soviet era chartered by the custodians, bucked and groaned as it descended through the thick Siberian clouds. Below us lay a landscape of unending white, a desolate ocean of snow and ice that seemed to stretch to the edge of the world. The cold was a palpable entity even inside the heated cabin. Our team was small, a scalpel intended for a surgical strike into the heart of a mystery. I was there for my nascent understanding of the Weaver and its cosmic context. Kestrel, grim and silent, led a small squad of his most trusted operators, men who had been with him since before the ranch. And then there was Dr. Alani Hassan. Argus had insisted on her inclusion. "You are the poet, Dr. Thorne," he had told me. "She is the grammarian. You will need both." Her presence was a source of constant friction. She observed my every move with a hawk-like intensity, her skepticism a tangible force field. She did not trust my intuitive leaps, and I did not trust her rigid adherence to protocols that were written for a reality that no longer applied. We landed on a makeshift ice runway, the plane's skis hissing across the frozen surface. The silence outside was absolute, the air so cold it felt like breathing microscopic needles. A collection of tracked Arctic-ready vehicles were waiting for us, prepositioned by the custodians weeks earlier. The journey to Site 12 took 6 hours. It was a journey into nothingness. There were no trees, no signs of life, just the endless rolling expanse of the tundra. But as we approached the coordinates, the landscape began to change. Patches of snow were melted away, revealing dark, steaming earth. The thermal anomaly was real. A strange metallic tang filled the air, and then we saw the flora. Growing from the permafrost were crystalline structures that resembled trees, their sharp geometric branches glinting in the flat gray light. They hummed with a low, resonant energy that made our sensor equipment whine in protest. "This is not a natural ecosystem," Hassan stated, her voice tight with a mixture of scientific fascination and primal fear. "This is a conversion. The area is being terraformed." We found Site 12 inches, the center of this bizarre crystal forest. It was a collection of modular habitats, half buried in the snow, now surrounded by the alien growth. There were no lights, no signs of life. Kestrel and his team went in first, their weapons raised. The rest of us followed, stepping into a scene of chilling, ordinary chaos. Half-eaten meals sat on tables. Open laptops displayed screens of frozen code. A game of chess was left unfinished. The 12 custodian researchers stationed here had not evacuated. They had simply vanished. No signs of a struggle, Kestrel reported, his voice low as he swept a room with his rifle. They just stopped what they were doing and walked away, or were taken. Evelyn's voice crackled in our earpieces from the command center, half a world away. "Eris, we're getting extreme temporal distortions from your location. Your biometric feeds are looping." One second you're in the habitat, the next you're 100 yards outside. Be careful, what you're seeing might not be what's actually there. As if to prove her point, a figure flickered at the edge of my vision, one of the missing researchers, his face a mask of terror. He was there for a heartbeat, then gone. A temporal echo. The only clue we found was a fine crystalline dust covering every surface. Hassan collected a sample, her hands moving with precise clinical care. Under a field microscope, the dust resolved into billions of microscopic, perfectly symmetrical crystals. "They're nanomachines," she whispered in astonishment. "Self-replicating crystalline von Neumann probes. They're converting the local matter, the air, the water, the soil into more of themselves. This isn't just terraforming, it's assimilation." Suddenly, a piercing shriek echoed from outside, a sound that was part machine, part animal. Kestrel's team snapped to high alert. "Contact!" One of his men yelled from the doorway. Outside, moving through the crystal trees, we rushed to the reinforced windows. Something was out there. It was tall insectoid and seemed to be made of the same crystalline material as the trees. It moved with a jittery, unnatural speed, its limbs flickering in and out of existence as it navigated the temporal distortions. It wasn't a biological creature. It was a machine, a construct of the same nanites that were consuming the tundra. A gardener in this alien Eden. It turned its multifaceted head towards the habitat. It had no eyes, but we all felt its cold, analytical gaze. From Serpent Ridge, Leo's panicked voice filled our comms. "Eris, we just received a delayed data burst from the Weaver. It's about the Siberian site. It's a warning." "What is it, Leo?" I demanded, my eyes locked on the crystalline entity outside. "It's not a natural bleed-through, it's an incursion. The Weaver calls it the Gray Tempest, a self-replicating nanite swarm from another universe." It doesn't just consume matter, it consumes and rewrites physical laws. It's not just a breach, it's an invasion. The crystalline machine outside raised a long, scythe-like arm. The air around the habitat began to shimmer, the metal walls groaning as the local laws of physics began to unravel. We were no longer just observers or even managers. We were standing on the front line of an interdimensional war, and we had just met the enemy. His operators opened fire. The roar of their conventional assault rifles was shockingly loud in the frozen silence, but the bullets might as well have been raindrops. They sparked harmlessly against the creature's body, the kinetic energy absorbed without effect. One of the custodian soldiers with us fired his energy weapon. The bolt of blue plasma struck the creature, causing the air around it to sizzle, but the hunter seemed utterly unfazed. It ignored the weapon's fire. Its attention was focused solely on the habitat, its arms still raised. The groaning of the walls intensified the metal, visibly warping, as if under immense pressure. Small objects in the room began to levitate. The laws of physics were being systematically dismantled around us. It's creating a localized reality bubble. Hassan shouted over the den, her eyes wide with terror and intellectual fury. It's overriding our physical constants with its own. The Weaver's message, Leo. What else did it say? I yelled into my comms, my mind racing. We couldn't fight this thing. We had to outthink it. It's not just a warning, it's a data packet. Leo's voice was a torrent of panicked information. It's a vulnerability analysis. The Tempest operates on a principle of absolute logical consistency. Its physics are perfect, rigid. The Weaver thinks that's its weakness. Hassan and I looked at each other. In that single electrifying moment, our rivalry vanished, replaced by the frantic synergy of two minds attacking the same impossible problem. A system based on pure logic is vulnerable to paradox, she said, her mind already moving faster than mine. Like the flawed pie, I finished understanding dawning. We can't sing it a song of harmony, we have to sing it a song of discord. We need a signal, she said, already moving towards our portable comms and sensor equipment, something that introduces a logical contradiction into its reality bubble. What kind of contradiction Kestrel demanded watching as a hairline fracture appeared in the habitat's reinforced window? Mathematics, I replied, my mind seizing on the only weapon we had. The Weaver communicates with universal constants. The Tempest is likely doing the same, but with the constants of its own universe. We need to broadcast one of our fundamental irrational numbers directly into its field. Pi worked once one of Kestrel's men suggested. No, Hassan interjected, her fingers flying as she connected a signal generator to a directional antenna. Pi is too elegant, too fundamental. It might be able to integrate it. We need something messier. Something that represents true intractable chaos within a defined system. She looked at me, a wild light in her eyes. We need to broadcast the Mandelbrot set. It was a stroke of insane genius. The Mandelbrot set, the most famous fractal in mathematics, an object of infinite complexity generated by a startlingly simple equation. It was a perfect representation of order emerging from chaos, and chaos lurking within order. It was a mathematical picture of our own messy, unpredictable universe. To a system based on rigid crystalline logic, it would be poison. Leo, can you transmit the raw Mandelbrot generation algorithm to my terminal, Hassan commanded. I'll modulate it into an audio frequency signal and broadcast it through this emitter. On its way, Leo confirmed. But Eris the Weaver's message has more. The Tempest nanites, they have a hive mind, but it's decentralized. The big one outside is just a localized server. The core of the intelligence, the nexus of the assimilation, is at the epicenter of the breach. I looked at the map of the thermal anomaly. There was a single brighter hotspot right in the middle, the heart of the storm. Kestrel, I said, my voice low and urgent, I need you to get me there. While Hassan distracts the hunter, I have to get to the center. If we can't shut this down at the source, this thing will just regenerate. Kestrel stared at me, then at the groaning walls, then back at me. He didn't like it, but he knew it was our only chance. Saddle up, he growled to two of his men. We're going for a walk. The plan was suicidal, but it was the only one we had. Hassan would be our shield, fighting a battle of pure mathematics. Kestrel and I would be the spear aimed at the heart of the enemy. Hassan finished her setup. Emitter is online, broadcasting the sound of madness in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. She flipped a switch. A low, discordant hum filled the habitat, a sound that seemed to scratch at the inside of our skulls. Outside, the crystalline hunter recoiled as if struck by a physical blow. The pressure on the walls lessened. Its head twitched its form, flickering more erratically. Hassan's logic bomb was working. It was trying to process an impossible equation, and the effort was causing its own reality bubble to destabilize. That's our window, Kestrel said. Let's move. We burst from the habitat's rear door, the three of us running low, our boots crunching on the alien crystal formations. The air was thick with the discordant hum from our emitter and the high-pitched shriek of the confused hunter. We were mice scurrying across the floor, while two giants wrestled in a language of pure logic. And we were running towards the one place on Earth that was at that moment the most dangerous place in the universe. Chapter 18, The Logic of Imperfection. The run through the crystal forest was a nightmare journey through a fractured world. The air shimmered with temporal echoes, ghosts of ourselves flickering at the edges of our vision, sometimes a step ahead, sometimes a step behind. Kestrel's operators moved with a tense, practiced grace, their weapons scanning the impossible landscape. The very ground crunched under our boots, not like snow, but like shattered glass. Behind us, the dissonant drone of Hassan's broadcast was a shield. The crystalline hunter was still locked in its struggle with the paradox, its form convulsing, its shrieks growing more ragged. It was buying us time, but I knew it wouldn't last. The Tempest was a learning system. It would eventually find a way to resolve or reject the flawed logic we were feeding it. The temporal distortions worsened as we neared the epicenter. Time seemed to stretch and compress. A single stride could feel like an eternity, the next could cover 20 feet in a blink. Stay focused on my back. Kestrel's voice was a grounding force in the chaos. Don't trust your senses, trust the man in front of you. We were navigating by instinct and discipline a fragile human chain in a sea of alien physics. We found the nexus in a shallow crater. The heat from it so intense that the air above it warped into a visible lens. It was not a machine in any sense we would recognize. It was a pulsating geometric lattice of light and crystal, 100 feet across, hovering a few feet above the blackened earth. It was both beautiful and utterly terrifying, a living equation that was the heart of the Gray Tempest. Millions of nanites swarmed around it, a glittering silver mist, their collective hum, a symphony of creation and destruction. This was the engine of assimilation. That's it, I breathed into my comm. The core. How do we kill it? Kestrel asked, his rifle aimed at the impossible object. We can't. I said, my mind racing, connecting the Weaver's message with what I was seeing. The Tempest isn't alive. It's a process, a program. Firing at it would be like shooting at a hurricane. We have to corrupt the source code. The Weaver's key insight was that the Tempest operated on a principle of rigid perfection. Its goal was to convert our chaotic, messy universe into a perfectly ordered crystalline state. It was a cancer of logic, and the only way to fight it was with something it couldn't possibly compute. I pulled a small cylindrical device from my pack. It was something Evelyn and I had designed in the months after the chorus, a desperate what-if tool we never thought we'd use. We called it the Chaos Emitter. It wasn't a weapon, it was an instrument. It had a simple EEG headset that I pulled over my head and a central processing unit that was at its core a quantum random number generator. It was designed to take the chaotic, unpredictable, emotional, electrical signals of a human brain and translate them into a modulated radio frequency. It was a device for weaponizing consciousness. What is that thing? One of Kestrel's men asked, his eyes wide. It's a Trojan horse, I replied, my hands shaking as I powered it on. Hassan is fighting its logic with mathematics. I'm going to fight its purpose with humanity. I looked at the pulsating nexus. Leo, can you get me a clean comms channel to the emitter I need to broadcast this thing? You've got it, Eris. Channel is open. His voice came back thin and distant. I closed my eyes, the cold forgotten, the danger fading to a dull buzz. I focused. I didn't think about equations or constants. I thought about the ghost of the lights I saw as a child, the irrational wonder that had set me on this path. I thought about the look in Evelyn's eyes when she finally saw the truth in the data. I thought about Kestrel's stubborn, fierce loyalty. I thought about grief and love and rage and hope. I poured every illogical, contradictory, beautifully flawed piece of the human experience into the device. I broadcast fear. I broadcast courage. I broadcast the concept of a noble sacrifice of dying for an idea, the ultimate paradox, for a being whose sole purpose was to replicate and survive. I sang it a song of our imperfection. At first, nothing happened. The nexus continued to pulse its crystalline hum unwavering. But then a flicker, a single point of light in the lattice stuttered and went dark. Then another, a discordant note entered its perfect symphony. The nexus was trying to process the data stream. It was trying to find the logic in grief, the equation for hope, and it couldn't. A wave of pure conceptual confusion washed over me from the nexus, a silent scream of a perfect machine encountering a ghost in its own code. The lattice began to shudder violently. The crystalline trees around us started to vibrate, their resonant hum turning into a grating shriek. "It's working," I yelled, dropping to one knee as the feedback loop of raw emotion and psychic noise threatened to overwhelm me. "It's trying to model mortality, and it's causing a cascade failure." The crystalline hunter back at the habitat, its form already weakened by Hassan's Mandelbrot attack, suddenly shattered into a million pieces, its form collapsing as its core programming was corrupted from the source. In our comms, we could hear Hassan's gasp of stunned relief. The nexus before us began to unravel. The lattice of light broke apart the crystalline structures, dissolving not into dust, but into a fine gray mist that was absorbed back into the steaming earth. The process of assimilation was reversing itself. "We need to go." Now Kestrel grabbed my arm, hauling me to my feet. The entire 50-square-mile zone was collapsing. The crystal forest was turning back into frozen tundra before our eyes. The temporal distortion snapped back into alignment with a gut-wrenching lurch. We ran the ground beneath us, shifting from alien glass back to solid, familiar permafrost. We made it back to the habitat just as the last of the crystal trees dissolved, leaving us in the center of a vast, steaming, and utterly silent circle of melted earth. The invasion was over. We hadn't won by overpowering it. We had won by showing it the one thing in the universe its perfect logic could never comprehend to soul. Chapter 19, The War Council. The flight back from Siberia was a study in contrasts. Kestrel's men were loose and relieved, the tension of combat replaced by the easy camaraderie of survivors. I was utterly drained my mind, feeling like it had been scoured by a sandstorm of alien thought. But the most profound change was in Alani Hassan. She sat across from me, the sample of the crystalline dust, secured in a containment unit on her lap. The sharp, critical edge in her eyes was gone, replaced by a deep, unsettling awe. She hadn't spoken a word since we lifted off. When we were halfway over the Arctic Ocean, she finally broke the silence. "The Mandelbrot set was a brute force attack, Dr. Thorne. It was noise, a disruption. What you did, that was a kill code." She looked at the small device I was still holding, the chaos emitter. "You weaponized the irrational. I've spent my entire life building systems based on logic and predictable outcomes. You proved that the greatest strength of humanity is its illogical, emotional, unpredictable nature. My protocols are useless against a threat like the Tempest." It was a concession and an admission. She was the grammarian, but she had just witnessed a poem save the world. "We needed both, Alani," I said, and for the first time I used her given name. "Without your shield, we would never have reached the heart." A flicker of a smile touched her lips. A new alliance had been forged, one based not on a shared threat, but on a shared terrifying understanding. We returned to Serpent Ridge, to a hero's welcome, but the celebration was short-lived. A summons from Marcus Vance and Argus was waiting. We gathered in the operations center, the holographic globe once again the focus of our attention. "Congratulations, Team Marcus," began his voice filled with a mixture of pride and gravity. "You have averted a global catastrophe. Your actions in Siberia have redefined the rules of engagement." Indeed, Argus's voice added from the main screen. "The custodians have been trying to fight these incursions with force and containment for decades with limited success. You have demonstrated that the only effective weapon is the one we never thought to use: communication. And not just with our allies, but with our enemies." He gestured, and the globe changed. The single red icon over Siberia was gone, but two new ones now pulsed angry and red. One was deep in the Amazon rainforest. The other was miles beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean, directly over the Mariana Trench. "The Weaver has been forthcoming," Argus explained. "Your success in Siberia seems to have earned its trust. It has updated its threat assessment. The Great Tempest was not an isolated event. It was a probe, a scout. There are 2 more active incursions on the planet, and these are far more advanced, far more aggressive." A cold dread settled over the room. We had won a battle, but the scope of the war was just now becoming clear. "The Amazonian breaches biological," Evelyn said, her fingers flying as she brought up the data streams. "The Weaver was now feeding us directly. It's rewriting the local biome, creating hyper-aggressive chimeric life forms. The Pacific breach is something else. It's psionic. It's not attacking our reality with nanites or biology. It's attacking it with thought. It's causing mass hallucinations, paranoia, and violence in every coastal city in the Pacific Rim. We had faced a threat to our physics. Now humanity faced threats to its biology and its very sanity. We can't fight a 3-front war." Kestrel stated his soldiers' pragmatism, cutting through the scientific horror. "We don't have the resources or the personnel. We won't have to, I said, a new audacious idea forming in my mind. I looked at the holographic globe at the silent blue light that represented the Weaver's location under the Utah Mesa. We have been treating the Weaver like an oracle, a library, but we've seen what it can do. The UAP swarm the control over local reality. It's a defensive system. We just haven't been asking for its help. I turned to the main console where Leo was already anticipating my request. Leo, I said, open a channel to the Weaver. Not a request for data, a request for an alliance. What are you proposing, Eris? Marcus asked, his eyes wide. The architects left the Weaver here to be a sentinel, a gardener for this corner of the universe. I explained, my voice ringing with a newfound conviction. We are the native life that has evolved in its garden. The Great Tempest and these other incursions, they are the weeds, the invasive species. We can't be just the Weaver's students anymore. We have to become its partners. We have to convince a god to fight alongside ants. The room was silent, the weight of my proposal hanging in the air. It was a leap of faith, a gamble of cosmic proportions. But as I looked at the faces of my team, Evelyn's fierce intellect, Leo's brilliant creativity, Kestrel's unshakable resolve, and now Hassan's rigorous analytical mind tempered by a new understanding, I knew it was a gamble we had to take. Our war for survival had just begun, and our greatest weapon was not a bomb or a bullet, but the hope that across the vast, terrifying emptiness of the cosmos, we could find not just an ally, but a friend.